All right, everybody, let's wrap up tonight with another presentation on controlling weeds. Now we're going to focus about the pros and cons of using chemical herbicides. And here to share his expertise with us is Dr. Jeff Stachler. Jeff was raised on a farm in Ohio, and he's worked with Extension in Ohio or North Dakota since 1995. That's a lot of experience, I'll tell you. Jeff has a PhD in weed science, and he currently works as the Extension Cropping System Specialist at the Carrington Research Extension Center. Jeff, welcome to the forums.
Tom, thanks for having me back. It was a joy last year, and I'm looking forward to this presentation tonight with some of the questions we've already had. So, Tom says I got to be done in 20 minutes. I got you folks can see I got a lot of information for you. My attitude is I'm going to go quick and fast to leave time for questions. And you have information there, and you're welcome to contact me afterwards. So again, we're a non-discrimination organization. I want to talk about some weed control basics, the good of herbicides, the bad of herbicides, and what I call the ugly of herbicides, and end up with 4 important points to remember. Just quickly, remember life cycles. We talked about this a little bit tonight, but there's annuals. There's 2 different actual types of annuals, a summer and a winter annual. So winter annuals are usually the things that you're going to see flowering the earliest in the spring. They survive the winter. A biennial is a plant that takes 2 or more years to complete its life cycle. And perennials we've talked about tonight that have been an issue for the gardens is perennials. You can have a simple perennial, which is a taproot like a dandelion or a curly dock, or you can have creeping perennials like rhizomes and roots. So a rhizome would be like quackgrass, a root would be Canada thistle, and there are differences between those. And then you can see bulbs and tubers and whatnot. So there are different methods of weed control. Cultural, here's some of the things to think about culturally. We want good soil fertility. The better the soil fertility, the better our crops. I'm just going to use the word crop tonight, folks, and I'm talking about garden. I'm talking about vegetables, flowers, fruits, whatever we're talking about. So crop is going to be just a generic term tonight for anything that we're trying to grow. The narrower the row spacing in our gardens, the quicker the crop canopy, and the faster the crop canopy, the better the weed control. Crop rotation is important. Actually, each crop species will give us a different suite of weeds, and so you always want to do crop rotation, and that's good from a disease standpoint. You can use mulches. We talked about grass clippings and the possibility of herbicides. Straw, there's possibility as a herbicides there. We use herbicides in wheat, so that's an issue. We've talked a lot about these mulches, plastic mulches tonight, and I just want to bring up the point that that's not all 100% safe either. Most of those are made out of petroleum products, and the longer they last out there, the more they break down, and that can be leaching into the soil. So not everyone agrees with the safety of plastics. There's some benefits and negatives with that, as you were talked about. We talked about the difference, was just talking about solarization. It's all about temperature, soil moisture, having direct sunlight in time. Prevent weed seed production. That's really the number one thing you can do if you don't have, if it's an annual weed or even some perennials that are producing seeds. If you don't have weed seed production, you don't have a future problem. Biological controls, cover crops was talked about tonight, companion crops, and yeah, we can use chickens and geese, Tom. What the heck? They're a little unpredictable. They can cause some problems to what we want, but there's some benefits they can provide to us too. Then there's mechanical control. Pulling weeds is a good way to go. Tillage tools, a rototiller, we already talked. Tom, I guess I understand better now that you're a rototiller guy. A rototiller is the most damaging thing you can do to soil. Create a compaction layer, create small particles of soil, and tighten up the soil. So the less we use a rototiller, the better. Any type of tillage tool, the deeper and more finer texture the worse the problem is. I like what I call reduced tillage weeders, garden weasel. You can see a picture of that there. That's my favorite tool. You got to treat it though, by doing it often and early. As soon as you see the first little seedling come out of the ground, that's when you do it. And then there's tine weeders and other things. Mowing, but if you don't kill the plant off, that doesn't work for perennials, but that's an option for annuals. And then there's chemical, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And there's organic chemicals and synthetic chemicals. But we got to talk about these types of herbicides. There are different ways to classify herbicides. One is how it works. A contact herbicide, the herbicide enters the parts of the plant, usually the leaves, and it kills the cells where it comes in contact. So that's what you have to have. All right, so we kill the cells just where the herbicide comes in contact. And so the thing is that we have to make sure that we get all parts of the plant covered. Any part not covered by a contact herbicide has the opportunity to regrow. A systemic herbicide, on the other hand, is where a herbicide is applied to the plant. Again, mostly the leaves, but other parts of the plant can take the herbicide in, and then the herbicide moves to the growing tissues, stopping some metabolic function. All herbicides, regardless of what it is stopping some type of metabolic process within a plant. And so with the systemic, you only need a lethal dose. Technically, if you can get the right concentration on one droplet of some herbicides, say like glyphosate on a leaf, and that is enough to kill that plant, then that's all you need. But we do have to make sure that we're trying to get enough on all the plants. We can't just cover one plant at a time. Other types of herbicides we can talk about: selectivity. How selective is it? Does it control specific types or individual species with little or no injury to the crops that are planted? An example is a group 1 herbicide that we call. This only controls grasses. An example of this is clethodim. So it only kills grasses. You can spray it over the top of broadleaf crops and not kill them and kill the grasses. I hate weeding grasses as well as common purslane, which is a broadleaf, but clethodim would be one way if you wanted to use herbicides to manage that. Non-selective, these are herbicides that kill any or all crop and weed species. So they'll kill any plant material that's existing. It depends upon the species as to how effective it will be. Annual weeds are easier to kill with non-selective than perennials. You have to have certain herbicides to kill perennial weeds that are non-selective, and the best example of the most effective non-selective herbicide, particularly for perennials, is glyphosate, which used to be called Roundup. We can talk about herbicide applications. There's pre-plant incorporated. You apply the herbicide to the soil surface, incorporate it to some depth, and then you plant the crop. This only controls germinating seedlings. You can't put this on the weeds that was shown in the last picture. That you can't put it on top of those weeds and kill those weeds. It's only going to kill germinating seedlings. Pre-emergence herbicides are herbicides applied after you plant the crop, but before the weeds and the crop emerge. And it's important to get the pre-emergence herbicides on before the crop emerges, because depending upon which pre-emergence you're using, and for gardens, there's not a lot really. You're not going to have a lot of crop injury compared to things that we use in more agricultural situations. But the point is, both pre-plant incorporated and pre-emergence herbicides are only controlling germinating seedlings, with a few exceptions. Sometimes some things can come back and pull young seedlings if the right timing and moisture happens. The most common herbicides we use are what we call post-emergence, and these are herbicides applied after the weeds and the crop have emerged. But again, if a crop is emerged and you're using a post-emergence non-selective herbicide, you can't get it next to the crop, or otherwise you're going to kill the crop. So it would have to be a selective herbicide if you're going to spray that herbicide over the top of the crop, like I talked about before with the clethodim, where you're controlling grasses. We always want to remember to make the herbicides most effective, and we apply to small annual weeds, less than 3 inches. The larger the weed, the more herbicide it takes and the more difficult it is to control. There is an exception to this, and this is with perennials, and I'll go into this a little bit more detail, but bud to early flower stage or in the fall is when we need to apply glyphosate to control perennials. So life is getting really difficult for everybody to understand what's in herbicides. There are so many generics. Almost every herbicide has been on the market for more than 20 years. And that's when a patent ends, and that's when a generic manufacturer can come in, and then you get what's called a different trade name. A trade name is what you usually are purchasing. So Preen, Roundup, those are trade names. Those are the ones that you're used to seeing on the thing. You really, as Tom started this program tonight, you really have to know the common name, which is the active ingredient of the herbicide. And the common name is the official name of a single herbicide active ingredient. And you're going to have to learn and understand this. It's complicated unless you have a weed science degree, and that's something we can focus on in the future if Tom wants to. We really need to have in-depth training about what herbicides do and how they work. So historically, these names were used by people like myself, but the thing is once you start combining 2 or more active ingredients, then it gets even more complicated. So you have this trade name, and Tom, you have to straighten me out later, but if I understood you right, you can have, I know that there's Roundup, but Roundup to me is glyphosate, and Roundup isn't triclopyr and fluazepop, and I can't remember what other one you said, diquat, I think. That's not going to kill perennials or most perennials. So naming is very difficult. You got to know the common name. Especially with premixtures. As an old weed scientist said, premixtures is can 'em and confuse 'em, is what he said. And then we got the chemical name, which is the exact something that chemists use. I have a hard time pronouncing them. You don't need to know that, but it's always listed on the label. So what are the good things about herbicides? It's the least time spent in controlling weeds. They're a very effective way to control weeds. It's the most effective and easiest way to control grassy weeds and broadleaf crops, like I mentioned with the clethodim. Controlling weeds in perennial crops or controlling perennial weeds. Most effective way to control those perennial woody plant species. We can do what we call a cut stump treatment, where you cut a woody plant off, a tree that's 2 foot in diameter, cut it off, put straight glyphosate on the cambium layer, and the tree won't come back. Many organically approved herbicides are safer to the environment. Here's something that was mentioned here about nutrient flow in plants. So you have 2 different types of weeds. You can have cool season weeds and warm season perennials. And what this chart shows is that, in the wintertime, as we're coming out of winter, the rhizomes, the roots, whatever's making them perennial has all the energy. As they start to grow, that energy goes down. But if you let it at some point in time, once it gets to that stage where it's putting energy back in, then it goes back up. And if you don't do anything, you got more energy and more roots or rhizomes for the following year. So what you could do is you can technically hand pull perennials, but you have to understand that you never let them produce that energy back. So you let the plant initially get 4 to 8 inches tall, depending upon the species, depends upon when you want to pull it, and then you just keep pulling it. Pull it every time it gets to 4 to 8 inches. You just keep doing it, and eventually you bleed it out of nutrients the same way that was done with the plastic over that Canada thistle. But unfortunately, I'm sure that those Canada thistles are going to come back because it wasn't long enough. When to apply glyphosate to perennials: early bud to early flower stage, or in the fall. If you're going to do it in the fall, you need to have a minimum plant height of 4 to 12 inches, depending upon the species. The timing depends on, again, whether it's a warm season perennial or a cool season perennial. If it's warm season, you got to do it before frost or leaf drop. If it's a cool season perennial like a Canada thistle or a dandelion, you want to wait till actually you have a frost to make sure that it's putting nutrients down. For perennials, we need a higher rate of glyphosate, and you need a 2 to 4% solution, which is about 2.6 to 5 fluid ounces per gallon of spray. But it depends on the concentration of the glyphosate. There's different concentrations of glyphosate out there, so you can play around with that. But the more the merrier to make sure those thistles and quackgrass is controlled. We need to apply spray grade ammonium sulfate with the glyphosate to maximize control. And this is a good time to control winter annual and biennial weeds too, at the same time we're controlling cool season perennials. So there are, I talked about organic and synthetic herbicides. So one of the things that you might see is corn gluten meal. Pre-natural vegetable garden weed preventer is one of those things. The word in the brackets is caution. That's for the signal words that you see on labels. And what's in parentheses, I want you to understand that just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe to the applicator. And if you read the label, as was mentioned before, reading the labels is very, very important. There's very critical information, and the label is the law. And you're not supposed to put corn gluten meal anywhere near water either. And how safe it is depends upon, there's still the whole process of how corn gluten meal comes about. The best way to make corn gluten meal to work is to apply it to the surface, incorporate it, and then water it. But you can't, this is, again, only going to kill emerging weeds. It's a pre-emergence herbicide. So you have to put corn gluten meal on in a garden after the vegetables have emerged, and then you're putting it on to control. And it depends on how much rain you get as to how many times you need to apply during the season. There's essential oils. One example is Burnout 2, citric acid, clove oil, and others. This is actually dangerous. Some of these things are acids and are very harmful to humans, and it can be aquatic. I couldn't see, the label wasn't clear to me whether this could be used in a garden or not, but there are other essential oils. You have a handout tonight from Colorado State University about organically approved herbicides. There's citrus-based ones made from orange peels. Green Match burn down herbicide, just as an example, by the way, so I don't get into trouble. I'm not promoting these particular trade names. I'm promoting the active ingredients. And so I don't have enough time, as you can see in that publication, lots of names out there, but it's harmful to pets and humans, and you can't apply that in water either. Acid base, Somerset all down herbicide, acetic acid, which is vinegar, right? You can't use household vinegar to get weed control. You have to have something that is much higher, like a 20% vinegar solution, and that's dangerous to use. It's even harmful to bees, I found out, and birds. And so just because it might be safe to the soil doesn't mean it's safe to other things. We got fatty acid based organic herbicides. Scythe is one of those. This is harmful to humans and aquatic life. It's pelargonic acid and other fatty acids. And then the iron HEDTAs, these are just for lawns only. They're iron based, and they can be harmful as well. So what are some PPI, pre-emergent synthetic herbicides? And these are ones, again, some of these you don't want to spray on the foliage. So if you're spraying this on a vegetable that's up, you may injure it. Some will injure more than others. Most of these PPI and pre products that I'm going to talk about are for landscape areas and not for gardens. Pendimethalin is one of those. Pendulum is the trade name. It can be used in landscapes, trees, and shrubs. But again, it can be harmful. You need to water it in to make it work, just like that corn gluten meal. Anytime you have a pre-emergence herbicide, you have to have a certain amount of water to make it work. And you have to apply that water if it's not coming from Mother Nature. Trifluralin, preen garden weed preventer, is one of the trade names. This is the one active ingredient that you can use in gardens to control small broadleaf perennial weeds and grasses. Again, it's a caution signal word, can be still harmful to humans, pets, and aquatic life if you don't follow the label. If you follow the label, these products are relatively safe. But this really, the label doesn't talk about incorporation. It does talk about watering immediately. I'd incorporate and water immediately to get the best control. Just remember, folks, if you're using preen in your garden, there is a potential for carryover. If you are going to plant red beets in an area where this was the year before, you're likely not to have red beets. So you got to be careful where you're putting the trifluralin. Isoxabens gallery is the single product, but there's other combinations. You can see this isn't for gardens. Lots of opportunities for ornamentals out there, but it does leach or run into the water or have runoff into the water, but you have to water that one in as well. Dithiopyr is another one. Dimension, landscape ornamentals, trees. Some of these are used in turf. This is one used in turf, both pre-emergence and post-emergence. Oryzalin, Surfland. This one, if you use it, it's going to call it. It's orange in color. It's actually a orange colored herbicide, and it will discolor your application equipment if you weren't aware of that. So you can see there's different uses here: ornamentals, bulbs, trees, fruit trees, shrubs. And then there's premixtures, all of those. And then there's another product called dimethenamide that's pre-emergence as well. Post-emergence synthetics, you need to add adjuvants and you need a rain-free period. Adjuvants are necessary to increase the herbicide getting into the plant. And so it's necessary. Make sure you read the label to know what adjuvants you need. We almost always need ammonium sulfate in post-emergence herbicides because it helps to siphon the water to the herbicide and helps penetration into the leaf. And you have to have a certain rain-free period depending upon the product, depends upon what the rain-free period needs to be, and that's listed on the label. Glyphosate is our most commonly used herbicide. Roundup Power Max is one that we can use in agriculture, but you can use it garden, landscape, trees, fruit trees, shrubs, and it's only a warning. Obviously, we know there's a lot of information out there about whether it is or isn't safe. Not all of that information is accurate, but nothing is perfectly safe, that's for sure. So this is a non-selective. So if you're going to spot spray in a garden like was talked about, you can't get anything on your desirable plants that you want, because just one drop could kill the plant, and if it doesn't, it will at least injure it to the point where it might not yield. So you got to be very, very careful about glyphosate. It's a translocating product, which is why it's always going to injure. But there is evidence, and I've seen it myself, is if you spray it on a plant and the glyphosate can exude out through the root and kill other vegetation around it, potentially, depending upon the situation. That doesn't always happen, but that can happen. Glufosinate is another herbicide, Cheetah Pro, for landscape ornamentals and trees. It's a caution, but again, it's still harmful to animals and pets. You can't get it in, apply it in water. It's a non-selective, okay? It's kind of the competitor to glyphosate. and so you can't touch desirable plants. However, it has minimal translocation, so it's a little more like a contact herbicide, so you don't damage things as bad if you get just a couple of drops on it. You might see symptomology, but you probably won't kill it. But you're not allowed to put this over the top of any crop unless it's genetically modified. Carfentrazone, I wish we could use this in the garden. This would be a really cool thing. This is a contact herbicide. Quicksilver is one of the trade names, but you can only use it in your landscape ornamentals and turf. It's a caution. It is harmful to humans and pets, again, as well as aquatic species. But this is only going to kill broadleaf weeds, and they have to be emerged. It's a contact, so you have to have good coverage. You can't touch desirable plants, although you can wiggle with that a little bit. If you used what was called a hooded sprayer, you could get really close to the crops and not cause any damage, but we can't do it legally in the garden. Okay. Farming, horticultural farmers can use this product, but we can't in a home garden. Diquat was mentioned tonight. This is another non-selective. Reward is one of the examples. It's a landscape, ornamental, and tree herbicide. It's caution, signal word, harmful to humans and pets, non-selective, contact, so you can't touch things. And I mentioned this clethodim before, grass out max. Clethodim, by the way, is the most effective. There's Sethoxydim and Fluazafop that was mentioned. Those two are not as effective as clethodim. I'd always choose a clethodim product. You can use it in gardens, ornamentals, trees, and again, you can apply that over the top of most broadleaf crops and not cause damage. There are times when clethodim, because of the formulation, can injure our crop, so you need to read the label and be careful. But this is only going to kill grasses, which is why you can spray it over the top of broadleaf weeds. So what is the bad of herbicides? Choosing the incorrect herbicide to control the weed that's present. You're wasting your time and money. Applying herbicides at an inappropriate growth stage. So if you spray glyphosate when a Canada thistle is 3 inches tall, you wasted your time. Annual weeds need to be, you don't want them very less than 2 to 3 inches. Applying glyphosate at the improper time. I talked about crop injury from the herbicide applied. You know, if you get glyphosate too close, or any other herbicide, or if like I said, if you would put preen down and then plant red beets, you're not going to get any red beets. Carry over the herbicide to the next season. We talked about that, red beets with preen. Drift of herbicides to non-targeted desirable plants. Make sure you're not spraying on a windy day, applying herbicides illegally. Again, the label is the law, so don't put it where it's not allowed on the label. Correct crop, correct location. Organically approved herbicides usually are not as effective. And all of the herbicides I mentioned, I forgot to mention in that for organics, they are only post-emergence herbicides with the exception of the corn gluten meal. Always wear all labeled PPE, personal protective equipment. We don't talk about that with homeowners. We need to. No flip-flops, no leather shoes, no shorts. That's not appropriate to apply herbicides. What's the ugly of herbicides? Herbicide-resistant weeds. If we use herbicides too much, that's a problem. It can be harmful to humans when it's applied improperly. If we follow the label, it's usually not a problem. There's some herbicides that are more harmful to animals, arthropods, fungi, bacteria, and other organisms than others, and especially if you improperly apply it or too often. You can decrease water quality due to runoff or leaching, depending upon the product and how it's applied. There is potential herbicide residues in the crops if you apply it improperly or at the incorrect growth stage. So I'm going to wrap up here, Tom. I think I'm a little over time, but still not 8:30 yet. Important points. Follow all herbicide label directions. It's the law, especially the use of PPE. That's protective equipment again. Only apply herbicides as necessary and in a timely manner. Glyphosate applied at the proper time is the most effective way to control perennial weeds. Only apply those herbicides labeled for the crop. And as you mentioned, Tom, and I love this, hand removal of weeds is the safest, but it's not the most time consuming method. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation and stop sharing. Any and all of you can ask questions in the chat box. Ask me questions at any point in time. How did I do, Tom?
Tons of information, just Honda stuff, man. I guess luckily I printed off the handout and now I can use that as a resource. And I like that Colorado State publication too. That was also helpful.
Yes.
Okay, they had a question about, but you answered. What's a trade name for clethodim?
Yeah.
Well, it's like
Yeah.
grass out max. You
Grass
mentioned
out max is one of them. There's many other trade names out there. That's just one of the examples of clethodim.
How about what do you mean when you say you can't apply this in water
Yeah,
regarding the essential oils?
yeah. If you read the label, some of them, especially acids, are harmful to the aquatic life in the water. If you
Oh,
if you saw most herbicides, you don't want to apply near water. Some can, most can't. And it's not necessarily the active ingredient in some synthetic herbicides. It's actually the adjuvants that's already put in the herbicide that's more damaging than the active ingredient. Did
okay.
I
So
complicate you there?
you know what I think what you explained there is that you're talking about you can't apply it near like a stream or a lake. That's what you mean by water or a
Well, even
river.
if you have standing water, you don't want to apply it in standing water. If there's
Yeah,
any aquatic life, period, right?
yeah,
You don't want to apply it near it or in it, on it.
yeah. How about Jeff? Here's a question, weed identification for you too here. What's the name of a perennial that grows everywhere and it has blue flowers? Safe to say it's invasive.
Well, Canada thistle has a bluish purple flower. If it has spines on the leaves and it gets tall, like was in the last presentation, that's Canada thistle. It's a creeping root system, and within one season, it can go 6 feet wide and it's 8 feet wide and 6 feet deep in one season.
How about ground ivy? That's
Ground
very
ivy,
common.
that would be a low growing plant. That's a purple one. That's a mallow. So you should see what we call stipules. Any mallow has stipules, leafy structures at the nodes. Look for that.
Sometimes
And
called
and
tree
pretty
control.
flowers. Pretty
Yeah,
flowers.
yeah, it's an ornamental in England, but what do
Yeah.
they know? And the other one I would say maybe it could be a violet. Sometimes that gets to be invasive, like in lawns too. But I think,
It,
yeah,
if it's a that would be something that's low growing, right? That never
yes,
produces a stem. So if it's like a dandelion and it's blue flowers, it's pretty violet. It's a pretty flower, right? But it can be
yes,
invasive.
that's right. Now you mentioned adjuvants. Now this gardener often uses dish soap as a surfactant. Is that a good idea?
Uh, Dish soap as a surfactant. The problem with using any dish soap is not all dish soaps are equal to each other from a safety standpoint. And unless that dish soap is labeled to be applied with the herbicide, then yes, you can. If it's not, you cannot.
Okay. Crops that are labeled organic. What types of herbicides can we use on organic crops?
Well, the organic herbicides I listed, those are all organically approved herbicides. I just want you to understand that there are safety issues to the applicator, not necessarily to the environment. And all of those products you can't spray over the top of the crop because they're post-emergence.
This person has issues with, is it horse weed or horse tail? Are those
The horseweed we also call mare's tail. It's in the aster family, has very small flowers, lots of grouped together. Horse tail is an equisetum, a primitive plant. You should see sections on it. Horsetail looks like a little Christmas tree.
right?
It has no real leaves. It has very small leaves. It's just branches, stem material, but they break apart easily and they're high in silicas, and so herbicides don't work well.
So, I think I remember hearing that like glyphosate won't do a good job on horsetail.
That's correct.
That's one of
That's
its
correct.
shortcomings. So there you got.
Because it's not a flowering plant. It's a spore plant.
Okay. So here's where you got to use your garden weasel, it sounds like, or my mega
Uh, uh,
rototiller.
Garden weasels are only effective for annual weeds, not perennial weeds.
Okay. Because of the deep root system.
Exactly.
Okay. How about field bindweed or creeping Jenny in a garden or lawn?
Yeah, again, I'm because of my training and background, the most cost effective strategy is to apply glyphosate. You can't get glyphosate on the vegetable plants, or you're going to kill or injure them. And the timing to apply is either when it's in the bud to early flower stage, earlier in the season, early in the summer, or in the fall. And actually, that's the way I would challenge folks to use the glyphosate is let those perennials grow from August 1st. So hand pull them until August 1st, leave them alone, get rid of your vegetables after you've harvested, let it grow. Actually, it can handle a light frost, and then you dose it with glyphosate. And maybe in 1 year you get it gone, and maybe not. The word you always have to remember with perennials is persistence. If you don't have persistence, you have no control of perennials.
Now, bindweed in a lawn, we've got broadleaf weed killers that can handle that, like Weed Be Gone Max, like it's got quinclorac, dicamba. It'll knock it down at least.
And that's the best way to describe it, Tom, is it'll knock it down. It'll keep it in check, but it will not kill it like glyphosate will. But you can't put glyphosate on your lawn or you'll
Correct.
kill the lawn.
That's not a good thing. That's a horror story. But I like Jeff what you talked about in general to control perennial weed as far as timing. The fall is a good time, or when a lot of these plants when they're just starting to send out their flower buds, they're
Yep.
vulnerable at that time too.
And the reason is that the plant isn't vulnerable. What you're doing is, especially with glyphosate, is that we know for sure nutrients is going back down to the rhizome or root or whatever is making it perennial. It takes the glyphosate with it and kills it out. That's why if you spray a Canada thistle 3 inches tall, the nutrient flow is up, not down. You kill off what's there and it just grows back twice as thick.
So this person has a question just with that, like when's the best time to apply glyphosate like in a daily flower bed? It's in fall, like you said, right?
Yes, but you can't get the glyphosate
Yeah,
on the daylily or
that's
else
right.
you will kill it. Now,
That's right.
one of the ways in a landscape bed to use glyphosate is to use a foam paintbrush. Remember, I talked about you only need the lethal dose to kill the plant. And so, as long as that bindweed, let's say, as an example, in a landscape bed is causing problems, then wait till it gets into that bud to flower stage and paint glyphosate with a foam brush, straight glyphosate on that leaf, on 2 or 3 leaves. If you use straight glyphosate with a little ammonium sulfate, and you will do a decent job. But if you wait till the fall, like you talked about, Tom, you'll have more success in the fall than doing it then, or you could do it both, and then maybe in 1 year you annihilate it.
How do I annihilate buckwheat?
Buckwheat. Buckwheat is an annual weed, so you just need to stay after it and not let it produce seeds.
About yellow wood sorrel in turf.
Yeah, common yellow wood sorrel is a tough one. 2,4-D dicamba and MCPP, which Tom talked about earlier as Trimec and other names, is not very effective on that. So the active ingredient that is effective is triclopyr. You have to understand triclopyr is more harmful to trees than any of those other ones because we can actually apply triclopyr to trees to kill them. It's very, very tricky. If you have trees and lawns and common yellow wood sorrel, you can cause tree damage.
Just follow label instructions
Yep,
and make sure it's okay for residential lawns and
yep,
don't juice it up. Don't juice
yep,
it up.
yep.
Here's a hard one, Jeff. What's your recipe to killing purslane?
Well, Tom doesn't like this, but if you can't beat them, eat them. Common purslane is very high on omega-3 fatty acids. But what I do, Tom, is that I meticulously hand pull every common purslane, put it in a bucket, and put it into the town dump. Because if you pull it and it rains, it will reroot. It is very prolific in seeding. It will seed when it's young, and the seeds last for decades. And that's why we always will have that if you ever get it started in your garden. And so, if we could use that carfentrazone I talked about with a shielded sprayer, that would be great. But that's not a legal application in the garden. Now, I did notice that some of the pre-emergence herbicides. The preen is supposed to be pretty good on it if you want to go that route. The corn gluten meal, I think, is halfway decent. And again, my best way, I only till my soil once in my garden when I plant to incorporate fertilizer. I never the garden never sees a rototiller again. The only tillage tool it sees is the garden weasel, and as long as you do it when the seedlings are coming up and do that every week, then you have very little hand pulling, and that's what I do. I kneel on the board because I don't kneel on the ground because I hate compaction.
Another blue flower weed that they suggested could be creeping bellflower. Can also be a
Yep.
troublesome weed too.
Yep.
Again, I think those.
Send me pictures. Send me pictures.
Yeah,
I'll
there you go. That's what it's all about nowadays. And how about buckthorn? How can I kill a buckthorn?
Okay, so buckthorn is a woody shrub, right?
Yes.
So I mentioned this briefly. So the best thing to do is take a pruners, get some straight glyphosate with a foam brush, cut that off, paint that surface with glyphosate, and that buckthorn is gone.
Yeah, fall's the best time to do that. I like
Actually, no,
no
nope.
for buckthorn.
Cut, cut stump treatments can be done every month of the year except maybe in North Dakota. So anytime the ground is not frozen, you can do it.
You know, I still think and triclopyr I think works pretty good on that. That's what we used before. In like when I lived in Wisconsin, that there was huge buckthorn problems in the fall. We'd all get out there with a stump killer, fresh wound triclopyr. But that glyphosate will definitely cause it to suffer. Same with Jeff. How about this with the green ash suckers on stumps and such? How are you going to control those suckers?
Well, again, you can't apply. There's nothing you can apply to a sucker to get rid of it without harming the tree. So you have to cut the suckers off by hand and just keep doing it on an annual basis if you want the tree. Now, if you want the tree dead, then just keep applying it to the shoots, and eventually you'll kill the tree.
This is on a stump. So how do you,
Oh, well, if it's on a stump that's already cut, if
yeah,
it's a cut stump, then do that cut stump. Cut every shoot off that you can. Put straight glyphosate on the cambium layer. Well, if it's 1 inch, you paint the whole cut surface. If it's 3 inches, you only do the cambium layer because that's where the living area is. That's where the glyphosate is able to move down. But I will tell you by personal experience, a cut stump treatment, if you put too much glyphosate on, will exude out through the roots and kill grass around it.
and is a similar approach. We're going talking about woodies now. Is poison ivy? How do you control poison
Same
ivy?
thing, same way, any time of the year, same way.
The same thing. Wound.
Cut, and apply the glyphosate. Now, there is one caveat. don't get soil on the cut surface because the soil is tied, the glyphosate gets tied up by the soil. So it has to be a clean cut, no soil, or the glyphosate won't work.
Okay, Jeff, you said you like purslane. I bet you like okra too. How about do you eat the leaves or do you eat the stems? What do you eat with that purslane?
The you know the leaves, the shoots, the youngest ones, not the old ones. You always eat the youngest ones, and you just put it in a salad. If you don't like it fresh in
So,
a salad, you can fry it up and do it that way too.
how about did we talk about vegetable oils for adjuvants? Did I
No,
have?
we did
Okay.
not.
What do you think about that?
So again, if it's not on the label for vegetable oil, then you can't use
That's
it.
right.
Vegetable oils are highly variable, and if they're not formulated right, they actually will do more harm to some herbicides than positive.
Yeah. Okay, last question. This person here's you can talk about neighbors and dealing with your neighbor. This person has an organic garden, but their neighbor uses lawn care service. Do they have to worry about that neighbor's lawn care service on their dealing with their organic garden?
It depends, right? That's our famous answer in extension, Tom, is it depends. If they are applying those herbicides to the lawn on a windy day, then those small particles of spray droplets can get into that garden. And then, if it was a certified organic, in this case, the gardener isn't certified, but if they were certified to produce it, they would be out of luck.
Yeah.
Because the herbicide is now in there. And so, but it's not just spray drift. It can be runoff, right? If it rains, if they put a high dose on and it rains, it can, and you're downstream, it can move that way too. So there's more than one way of movement, and yes, you're going to have, if it's not labeled for the vegetable, then it's harmful or could be harmful, right? You can't eat it. But if it's labeled, then that's not a problem. But there's no, dicamba 2,4-D and MCPP aren't labeled for any vegetable crops. So
And of course, if you see any symptoms, what kind of symptoms would I see if they
yeah,
sprayed let's say dicamba or 2,4-D?
yeah.
What would
So we
my
call the
tomatoes look like?
Yeah, we call those growth regulators. We'll get leaves that get cupped. If it's bad enough, stems will start twisting, stems will swell up. Those are the type of obvious symptoms that you'll see.
Okay, there you go. And that's why communication with your neighbor before the spraying is always the most important thing.
Yep,
Communication is what it's all about.
yep.
Okay, Jeff, that was power packed full of information, man. Tremendous. But that's it for tonight, guys. Now, next week, we're going to talk about some special topics, including night flying moths and how to grow grapes, and also how trees wake up in spring and begin to grow. So tell your friends about the forums. Everybody's welcome to attend. And one last point, got to keep in mind that all the sessions are recorded and the handouts are posted there too. So if your friend wants to get the handouts, they're available on the Spring Fever website. What's that? ndsu.ag/springfever25. Okay, so it's all there. And but that's it for tonight. I hope everybody had a good time tonight and have a happy spring. See you next week, everybody.